All right, folks, welcome back to another edition of The Real Biology here at Serious Angler. And as always, we're back with the man himself, Mr. Stephen Barden, and I'm your host, Bailey Eibret. Steve, been a minute since we got to do some recording because it sounds like it is busy times for you, not really busy times for me. I've been making poor life choices and choosing the woods over the water. But what has been up in the life of Mr. Steve Barden?
It's fall, man. Fall in Texas is a marathon. Um, and whenever it's fall, so for my private lake company, Texas Pro Lake, we're going out and we're electrofishing, sampling all of our management clients' lakes, and then we do another dozen to 2 dozen non-management clients that are just additional surveys that we're doing for people. But what we're looking at is, did the things we recommend work this year or not?
Mm-hmm.
And what recommendations do we need to put in place to be more successful next year or maintain that success next year? So we're electrofishing every lake. You can electrofish. I like to start when water temperature drops below 80 in the fall, and we'll electrofish till water temperatures maybe 60. You just want fish to be shallower than 8 foot on average, to where you can sample enough of the population to get your answer about what does forage look like, what does initial first year growth look like, what does recruitment potentially look like going into winter, what do adult fish look like, where are they, where's vegetation growing. You just collect all that information. And so my team now, we're the week before Thanksgiving as we're recording this. You're hearing it after Thanksgiving. My team is finishing up. We've got maybe a week. We'll grab a couple the week of Thanksgiving, but then maybe one more week of December that we'll knock out the last few surveys, and then it's into winter mode. And winter mode, we'll write every one of those clients a full report, create a budget for the next year, and we got to produce all those in the month of December. So it's a lot of office work coming up. But that's good for me. That means I can actually accomplish a lot. We can record more podcasts, get out of the boat for a while, and then I probably do 60% of my fishing over the month of November, December, January. Whenever it's cold and everybody else is either in the woods or whatever, that's when I finally don't have to be on the water sampling, so I get to be on the water fishing.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good then.
How have you been successful in the woods, or just been walking around?
Long story short, no.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It is probably the most, not to, I'm sure the serious angler folk are sick of me at this point because I brought up, especially like when it's Deacon and I talking about our Western series. We talk about a little bit of hunting because we're both hunting nuts, but I've had the worst luck possible ever this year when it comes to hunting. I've basically had encounters with mature bucks and all under 80 yards and not had a single shot at one the whole year for one reason or another. But now it's finally gun season. Had potentially a shot at it wasn't mature. It was like a 3-year-old 8-point. I've only hunted twice so far in gun season. It's just so many people. Because I'm hunting all public land, but had a doe fawn screw me up, which was lovely. But long story short, no, it's been a tough year trying to hold out and chase a giant public land buck. But we'll have meat in the freezer, which is good. Just
Good.
Not the ones that we've been looking for anyway. But long story short, yes, the fall is awesome. I need to make better life choices next year and fish more in the fall as I've done in recent years of chasing largemouth, chasing smallmouth. That's a great time when no one's on the water and I get to. I feel like I do actually a lot more learning about the fish in the fall, because I feel like in summer for me, like obviously you can learn every single time you're on the water, but summer you have a lot more from an angler's perspective. You have a lot more randomness that either can't be replicated or fish, obviously with the warmer water temps, they're all over the board, in different vegetation pieces, whatever. The fall, I feel like fish are much more calculated and there's a lot more reasoning behind what they're doing. And I feel like that's where you can learn a lot of it, especially paying attention to forage species.
Right.
And actually, I'll pitch this over to you because we just had on Trip Berlinski and Brian Latimer. And one of the things Brian Latimer was saying about for him, because he's a power finesse guy, loves throwing shaky head, Ned, that kind of stuff, drop shot. He doesn't change anything up in when the temperatures get cold, besides still looking for forage. And he thinks that water temperature isn't important.
Thinks water temperature isn't important.
Is not important. It's more of where's the forage, what's the forage doing, and then therefore from that, following that, is he can go catch bass and figure out what they're doing.
Yeah.
Versus,
Okay, I get it. So in the summer months, you do have to take into account high water temperature, where the thermocline is,
mhm,
and you can exclude a lot of water based on temperature,
right?
and you can also exclude a lot of techniques because of how that water's heating or if there's a thermocline and things like that. In the fall, fish could be anywhere in that water column from top to bottom because there's oxygen all the way to the bottom. So they're going to select exactly what Brian's talking about. Where's the food? And so I could imagine that if I was just trying to narrow down water, it would be easier to narrow down water based on where can I find food versus water temperature at that point. I think that flow of water, inflowing water in the fall is important. I think that habitat becomes very important because what you really need is you need to find food that intersects with habitat in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite part about the fall is number one, you should be fishing with a partner. Because if you do something in the fall and you get your partner to replicate it, you're both going to be successful. And
You're
in
saying like in
fact,
the same boat, or you're saying just in general, like separate
in the
boats?
same boat. No, in the same boat, dude.
Yeah.
Like if I make a cast and I hook a fish, you should make that same cast. Like the second I hook a fish, your bait should land where my bait was.
Mm-hmm.
Because most likely those fish are paired or in a small school. They're hunting together. And it's all size classes of fish now intermingled together. And a lot of times in the fall, if I hook a fish and I'm bringing it to the boat, I'm bringing fish with it.
Yeah.
So you could be more successful too. So now we can have those big number days a lot easier because in the fall, the fish, I would say the fish are doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're
Yeah.
chasing food, they're feeding aggressively. This is one of the times of years where they're putting weight on. Now the fall, your fall is different than my fall. My fall is 85 degrees, water temperature is like 68 to 70 degrees.
Mm-hmm.
I can
My ball
imagine
is
what
42
your
right
fall is. Right. Now you also see I'm in a sweatshirt and you're in a t-shirt. So
Yeah, yeah.
we're very different humans too.
I just I went for a run today before lunch, and I go outside. I'm like, oh, it's pretty nice outside. Like it feels warm for late November. And go for my run. I checked the air temperature. It's 43 degrees. And I'm like, wait a
Crazy
second.
man. Crazy
that's
man.
that's just northern blood, man. That's just all it
I
is.
guess so.
Yeah.
I guess so.
But awesome show ahead for us today. And with that being said, give the folks a little snippet. Like what's a little preview of who we're having on the show today and what we're talking about?
This is gonna be a great show. This is a show that I've been looking forward to selfishly. We went to Black Bass 2025. You came. It was an outstanding event. I got home and I had an email, and the email was from a professor from Illinois. His name is Dr. Corey Susky, and what Corey was asking me for is advice on. He saw the panel discussion we had, where we had you, Ken Duke, we had several um, biologists that also have podcasts. We had you all up, and we were talking about new media and how to interact and talk about the science and all those things. And Corey was in the audience.
Mhm.
You and I didn't get to meet him at the meeting, but he was in the audience, and it hit home. And he said, "I want to do that. I want to get on shows." And so since August, I've been trying to work on getting his schedule, my schedule, your schedule all to align. And so we have Dr. Susky on today's episode, and his research really centers around um, fishing and stress and how fish recover from fishing and live wells and tournaments. And it's just, he's got a wealth of information. And then somehow we got so lucky that our schedules not only aligned with him, but they also aligned to where we could have Gary Klein on. So Gary Klein returns. He was on episode 1 of Real Biology. Now he's back. And
Back.
Gary adds another depth to this. You and I, um, you're a very accomplished kayak angler, but you don't have a live well in that kayak that I'm aware of.
Nope.
Gary Klein has made money putting fish in a live well, and he's done it for many years. And so it was great to have a second guest that has the experience where we have somebody who's doing research on what are these fish, what's happening to them, and then we have another person who's like, yeah, and by the way, I've been doing that professionally, and here's how it really works. So it's a fun episode.
Absolutely. There's multiple different lanes of it, and it's kind of almost like not to its entirety, but almost a full scale overview of like fish care in general, talking about some myths of it too, some truths behind it, not just the angler theory that you've heard the old guy at the boat ramp tell you for the past 30 years. And talking about like use Mountain Dew for stopping bleeding of a fish. Like we talk about that and so many different things. But I think without further ado, Steve, as we can preview is all we want. We just got to get into this sucker.
We got to get into it.
All right, folks. Mr. Gary Klein and Corey Susky. Should be good. You guys still got us okay?
We're good.
Gary, everything good on your end?
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, folks. We're back. Another edition of The Real Biology with not a stranger to the show Serious Angler or Real Biology at all. We have Mr. Gary Klein joining us again, and his first time on the show, and we're happy he's here. Mr. Corey Susky. How's it going, folks?
Going well, thank you.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Of course. Steve, how's everything on your end?
It's beautiful. It's raining here in Texas. We're so excited. Today, we're going to talk about fish care, and we've got two experts from both sides of the spectrum here. We've got somebody who's probably put more fish in a live well than 99% of the people on Earth, and we've got somebody who designs experiments to figure out what happens to those fish during that trip and during the weigh-in. So I'm very excited about this episode.
Let's dive in. First of all, Corey, did I even pronounce your last name right?
You did. Yes.
You did? Awesome. Perfect. I know in Steve's text, it was Suzuki. When I saw your name on there, I'm like, man, this is going to be interesting. This is the toss-up as a host of a podcast where you just like, we're going to shoot for the stars and hope we nailed it. But
you can tell how many times I text about my Suzuki engine because it just auto-corrected it. It's like, Corey, you're buying a Suzuki. I know it.
No problem. It's all good.
Man, let's start diving into it. I guess maybe Steve, we get a little background. I know obviously Gary is no stranger to the show, but Corey, you're being your first time, kind of intro to the folks of who you are, what you do, and we can go from there.
Sure. Yeah. So right now I'm a faculty member at the University of Illinois. And it's kind of scary to say, but I've been here almost 19 years, which is kind of crazy. And we do all kinds of different things with broadly fish conservation. So we're playing with carp, and I got some folks working on dam passage and different things like that. But we've done a lot of stuff with tournaments and fish care and fishing and catch and release fishing. My PhD from a bunch of years ago, I'm actually from Canada, so I did my PhD up in Canada, but I was my PhD could loosely be translated to how do fish feel about being in a tournament and what can we do to make it better for them. So we've been playing with that for a long time, everything from like exercise and then live wells and recovery, a lot of recovery. And then how can we recover fish so that when they're released, they go back into the water in pristine and optimum condition. Why fish hit lures, why do we catch fish, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of all over the map, but a lot of stuff that I think is really interesting. So hopefully it's interesting to everybody else too.
Well, for our audience, it's going to be very interesting. This is what we eat up is this kind of science. I know Gary's already in his head, like he's got a dozen questions. I'm going to try to hold him off for a few minutes so we can host the show. But Corey, if we can, let's start at the point of catch and we'll work from point of catch all the way to release a fish throughout the episode, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about this research into why do fish actually strike a lure?
Okay, okay. So that was really cool. So it's kind of it seems to be a little bit like species specific almost. So the thing that got us going on this with bass, there's groups that work out of Europe, and they were asking this question about carp, right? Common carp, not like invasive jumping carp, but common carp. Because in Europe, like going carp fishing is kind of a big deal, and people like to go carp fishing. So they're trying to figure out why common carp would hit lures. And as you guys probably know, common carp fishing is like the opposite of bass fishing, right? Meaning bass fishing, you got the boat and you're driving around, you're hunting for fish and you're trying to find them and that kind of stuff. Whereas carp, you like sit on the bank and you put your bait out and you wait for the fish to come to you. So what they found with the carp fishing was that the fish the reason or the motivation for fish to hit or which fish are caught are fish that are behaviorally like bold and active and like to swim around and are really mobile and those kinds. So that makes sense. If you're a carp, that's how you're just like an aquatic pig, right? You're just swimming around rummaging. So those are the fish that get caught. And the reason it becomes important is because if those fish, nobody really harvests common carp, but if those fish happen to say, get hooked deep or die or whatever and get removed from the population, well, then you remove those types of fish and you leave the shy, timid, stationary ones. And so you can actually reduce the quality of your fishing inadvertently simply by going fishing and removing those fish from the population. So that's what we found for common carp. So it's called a timidity syndrome. They had all these like cool sort of implications for that kind of stuff for common carp. So we wanted to ask similar questions for largemouth bass. And so what we found with largemouth bass was that those behavioral characteristics don't really play a role in who strikes a lure. And what drives lure striking in largemouth bass is how you respond to a stressful situation. Like not are you stressed, but what happens if something stresses you out? Okay, so because largemouth bass arguably largely kind of they'll sit under a dock, they'll sit under a log, right? And they kind of like wait, and then something falls in front of their face, that being the lure. And so the question is, what happens for a bass if something falls in front of their face? Do they freak out and go like, bah, and swim away? Or do they kind of say, that's kind of cool, and go check it out and probably strike it? And basically what we found then is if you are a bass that is relatively calm in those kinds of situations when something kind of startles you, then those are the ones that we're probably going to catch. Versus the ones that are a little bit more finicky, or they would take off because it startles them and then they leave. Those are the ones you're not going to catch. And then again, over time, I'm not saying that we have had an impact on populations, but then it becomes a mechanism by which, okay, you could see fishing quality go downhill because if those fish are removed from the population, or if they're deep hooked, or if they die in a tournament, or die from like again being hooked in the gill, or are eaten, or whatever, you're going to leave the fish that are less responsive to lures, and potentially there's a way that we could have reduced fishing quality because of just basically going fishing.
Yeah, I mean, Bailey, that's kind of some of the stuff we talked with Josh about, like human induced evolution on our fisheries, which is how we're selecting for fish that we're keeping and harvesting and those kind of things can change these populations because their reproduction is so quick. It's easy to actually modify a population. So that's really interesting. Gary, you explain why a fish may strike a lure. I've heard you do it for kids a million times, and you do it in such a way that I think our audience needs it. So kind of give us the English perspective.
Well, yeah. And again, this is the way I've always thought of it in my mind, based on a lot of time on the water and a lot of different experiences with single fish, multiple fish in current conditions. And I've always explained it to people that bass have a personality. They're a lot like people. You have loners, you have fish that like to be in groups, and they kind of go along, get along. It seems like the artificial lures that I use and that I have over my entire career, I've always said that I feel that probably 80 to 90% of the fish I caught were not because they were actively feeding, it was because I was using a presentation or a cadence or something that triggered their personality. And basically, on sight feeders in clean water is different than lateral line feeders in off colored water. Those are my two separations. So, as an angler approaching a new water body for the first time, as I back my boat down the launch ramp, water clarity is one of the first things I look at because that kind of allows me to start understanding what the personality of those fish may be. And I know if the water's clean, then I'm going to be able to trigger off a sight versus lateral line. So that opens up a whole range of techniques that I can use to catch those fish, because fish are not like people. They can't stop something with their hands and feel it, smell it, taste it, and set it down. They only have their mouth. So a lot of times, and I've seen this, and I know everybody has that's on this, where in an aquarium, a bass will grab a crawdad and crunch it and just blow it out and never eat it. You know, that's a lot of territorial stuff. But we as an angler, when a fish puts our lure in the mouth, we automatically think that fish is actively feeding when it really wasn't. I was reeling the bait so hard, I challenged that fish to stop it and then think about it, and I've already caught him. So that's kind of always been the way I've been brought up. And I've been able to apply that throughout my career on all different types of water bodies, on all species of bass.
Now, Bailey, you and I both have fished with Gary, and we know there's another reason that a fish would bite Gary's lure, and that's for an autograph, right?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So like, wait a second, that's Gary Klein. I would love to get in his boat.
Hey,
We've all experienced that.
We're just persistent, okay? We work awful hard at it.
It's quite the opposite for me. They see that plastic boat floating up, and they're like, "Yeah, I'm not touching anything he's throwing."
Yeah,
love it.
All right, so Corey, fish strikes a lure. Now let's talk a little bit about research in the actual fight.
Mm-hmm.
What is a fish experiencing during the fight to the boat?
So there's a lot of good stuff on that. That was pretty clear cut. That's just exercise. There's no difference between reeling in a fish when you catch it than if we were to go run. You know what I mean? It literally is just exercise. So they get a buildup in their muscles of lactate, similar to what we would get. Like you go for a run, you get a cramp in your leg. That's lactate. That fish does the exact same process, same output, same response. And the longer the fish is fought, then the greater sort of like the disturbance or the lactate production. And there's a bunch of different things that kind of happen when we start producing lactate too. But I mean, for the most part, it's just exercise. The longer you fight it, the bigger the disturbance. And then after that, then the fish starts to recover. And that recovery can take anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on what's going on. Again, under optimum conditions, it's 2 to 4 hours. There's things we can do to slow that down. I don't really know if we can really speed it up much because there's still just a finite amount of time. But there are things we can do that kind of makes it worse. And then after 2 to 4 hours, normally the fish is back to normal and they're ready to go again.
So the lactate that's produced in the muscles, how would you design an experiment to test this?
So it's actually relatively easy. So we end up doing it with lab stuff, but I think you can go to like the drugstore and just buy like a little handheld little lactate meter. They've got little strips, and so it's actually really easy to do. And getting blood out of a fish is like, it's like when you go to get blood or go to the doctor, like there's just a vein or artery or whatever, you just get blood out. It's really easy. And so what we would do is to do it in a lab setting. Fishing can be unreliable and can be really difficult. And so we usually work with the hatchery and we just call the hatchery and get fish from the hatchery, because then it's just, we get a whole bunch of them and we don't have to worry about whether or not we're going to have animals for doing the study. So then there's the strengths and weaknesses. We've done it with hatchery fish and we've done it with wild fish too. But basically you just put them in a little kiddie wading pool and you pinch their tail and you make them swim, because that's all they're doing when they got a lure in their mouth, and you literally just pinch them and they just sort of swim, and eventually they just run out of gas and they're just exhausted, and then we consider them done. And then you basically just take a needle and a syringe like you'd have at the doctor's office, and you just take a little blood sample, and then And you freeze it, and you can run a bunch of different assays on it and measure a bunch of different things. But it's actually relatively straightforward. So then what we would do is you'd have fish. We would the grab and stab, we call it. You do the grab and stab right after exercise, and you have another group that you'll wait for like 30 minutes and do a grab and stab on them. Just put them in basically like a little box. We usually use like just little Rubbermaid containers with a little flow of water going in them, but you just let it sit quietly. And we do that for 30 minutes, and then say after an hour, and then like an hour and a half. Different fish usually along the way. You can do the same fish or different fish, but we usually do different fish. And just see how long it takes in recovery. Just measure the lactate and just find it goes up, and then it kind of comes back down. And there's other things you can measure. You can measure glucose. We can measure hormones. We can measure ions. Lots of different things in the fish. But that's essentially the study design, is doing something like that.
Yeah.
Usually get a group of fish that you try and sample before exercise, so that we have the sort of the baseline and we know what the starting point is. And so get that way too. So have them sort of resting in a Rubbermaid container first, and then try and literally as quick as we can with as little activities we can, just do the grab and stab that way.
Amazing. It sounds so simple whenever you think about it, but I don't know.
But from an angler,
think about it.
from an angler standpoint, what Corey's explaining there, I've experienced that. It seems like if I'm using a technique with a long rod and heavy line, I'm catching the fish at a very short distance, and the fish is in the water, and the battle is very short, and he's in the boat in the live well. Those are usually the healthiest fish, because they haven't exerted any energy at all. I catch big fish on a spinning rod and 6-pound test line. I got to fight them forever. Definitely, they have a longer recovery time. They've worn themselves out big time. Yeah.
Now that
Corey,
was.
Go ahead, Bailey.
So that was, you mentioned a couple hours that they were physically, basically fully refreshed.
Yep, someplace between 2 and 4. Yep.
Now, I guess I'm curious, and maybe you don't have that information, but like from you were talking about the fish that would be startled on if a bait splashed in front of them. Is it 2-3 hours? Do you know if they are in that same mentality, or is that a whole different discussion?
That's a good question. I don't think we know that. Eventually fish are going to hit, right? Because if nothing else, it's like Gary said, like they just kind of get hungry, right? Or they're sort of curious or something. But I think that they, a lot of times they just sort of, I don't really think that they truly will become panicked. They just sort of, they just don't even care, right? They're just like, not for me. And they just sort of ignore it for whatever reason.
Okay.
Those are the ones that I usually go get when I go fishing. Well, thank you.
Well, Corey, you don't sound like you have a lot of confidence in your fish catching ability. Like you got to call the hatchery to make sure you have enough to work with.
Yeah, I got a new plan. Corey, you just call Gary, and he'll make sure you got enough.
So we can't all be Gary Klein, all right? We can't speak to the fish.
We'll catch them.
So, Corey, you mentioned hatchery fish, and whenever you say hatchery fish to me, what I think of is feed train 10 to 14-inch largemouth bass, northern largemouth. Have you replicated the same thing on smallmouth, and do we see differences between those two species?
So it depends on what we're looking to replicate. Like if we just want to sort of go to like the bare bones, like, how do fish respond to angling? That's pretty common and pretty ubiquitous, meaning like it doesn't matter if it's a bluegill or a bass or a hatchery, like it's just exercise and they're swimming and they're just like working hard and then they're kind of recovering. So that part's pretty common and ubiquitous. Where it becomes a little bit more different, it would be cross species. Some fish, will fight more, and some fish are just a little bit. They don't respond quite as well to the angling, or they just don't fight as hard. So there's. I don't know. Yeah, it depends on what we want to look at in terms of how they're responding. But by and large, that's pretty common and pretty consistent across individuals, or whether you're hatchery or wild or what have you.
There you go. Okay, so there's if it's pretty unanimous across all species that it's just exercise, then we can think of the experience of being caught as a common part of a fish's life, because it has to swim against current at times. It has to exercise at times. Like this, just the act of being caught, that portion of it is not outside of its normal realm of activity.
Exactly.
what are the parts of angling that then become outside of normal activity or would lead towards stress or mortality or something like that?
So yeah, so that's really good. You're right. It's I mean, fish need to either escape from predators or find prey, and so this concept of they're kind of built for doing exercise, right? That's not anything that they can. That's something that they usually would encounter. Where it becomes a problem is some of the peripheral stuff. So one example is air exposure, right? So if we get a fish, we get it in a boat, whether we want to keep it or don't want to keep it, like if you've got it in air, it's not really designed to do well in air. And so that's an example of something that is going to be a problem for the fish. High temperatures, like fish, eventually when it gets to be really warm, they just start to be less comfortable. That'll obviously change from species to species and season to season and all that kind of stuff. But high temperature in general starts to get hard on fish. If we, if they start to spend a lot of time in a really crummy net and they start to lose slime or lose scales, or they're, on a boat carpet, that kind of stuff, that can become challenging for them. So there's those types of things that kind of go outside of just the exercise and the recovery that can be a problem. It's sort of a bigger topic all on its own. But bad live well conditions, if a live well condition's not great, that can cause additional stressors, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Corey, what you're saying right there is exactly what I was thinking as we were talking about this subject is, another element of what I've been involved in my entire career is the transportation of those fish that are caught.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that when I started, the industry is very young, the sport was very young, and it's evolved. But I've seen a lot of effort go into live well systems for boats, where in the beginning, it didn't matter whether you killed them or not because they weren't bringing them in live. They were bringing them in on stringers. As we evolved, we went from a 15 fish stringer to a 10 fish stringer to a 7 fish stringer. Now we're pretty much at a 5 fish stringer throughout the country. Catch, weigh, and release. And then some circuits do catch, weigh, and immediate release. So there's no transportation of those fish involved in the competition. But one thing that I've seen in the live wells from the very beginning, because as fishing became very popular, it's usually a 2 individual in the same boat sport. So the first manufacturers, when they first started producing the live wells in the bass boats, they actually split the live wells. So you had a live well in the bow of the boat and a live well in the back of the boat. And it basically, the guy running the boat would use the front live well and the guy in the back would use the back live well. And over time, we learned that everything is magnified in the bow. So those fish that are getting pounded 10 times worse in the bow. Plus you don't have the correct construction of a high performance bass boat to hold a significant amount of water in the front, keep those fish alive. So that's why you've seen almost all bass boat manufacturers settle for a live well positioned behind the driver's seat. And they've had to kind of move the position of the gas tank. But that driver's seat area on a pad built bass boat is the softest riding area of the whole platform. And you still see some boats that have one large live well. And you see some boats now, manufacturers now, that are going to what I think is a better system, to individual live wells with individual systems to each live well. So it does give the angler a backup. You always have one live well. And most of the manufacturers today, large live wells. I mean, like a lot of water. So you can carry a large stringer of fish. But still, you think about the environment where you're fishing, the water body that you're fishing, and then current conditions. And you have to make that trip back to a weigh-in. That's where you start really seeing the effects on a live well when you open up your live well at the end of a 35-mile-an-hour Lake Sinclair run back, 2.5 foot waves, and everything is red finned. And they're very stressed. You can see there's some other elements in the live well too that I think are going to get better in the future. I've already experienced anglers kind of going above and beyond to work with fish in a live well. There's two areas that I really appreciate it because I use them myself. One is I've noticed the guys cutting floaties. So they have floaties, which are basically just noodles that everybody trims down to the top side of their live well. It keeps any fish from coming up and catching the edges inside the top of the live well. And the other thing are fin clips instead of caul ringers inside the mouth. Those are two improvements that I really, really glad to see those happening. Everybody's learning.
Absolutely. And Corey, let's talk about a bad live well for a minute. Like, what are the conditions that you would consider a poor live well that lead to stress?
So there's some stuff I think that we know fairly well, and there's some stuff that I think that I think we still need to talk about more because it's a little bit unclear. One that's easy that I think we know fairly well is low oxygen, right? So if you got too much fish for the volume of water, oxygen can and will go down. And that's bad not only because the fish, when they're recovering from exercise, need oxygen. That process, basically reversing all that lactate back into like its fuel form, that requires oxygen, so they can't recover. But then also, like a fish just existing in a live well needs oxygen to survive, right? So if you have too high a biomass of fish for the volume of water or even the temperature of water, that's a problem. So it doesn't happen a lot, but having said that, I don't think we know a lot about oxygen in live wells because the technology hasn't really been there yet. We can do smallish oxygen sensors, but they're still about the size of a water bottle. Like they've kind of come a long way now, and they can log oxygen, but you know what I mean? They're not tiny. We can do temperature sensors that are about the size of 2 quarters stacked on top of each other. We can talk about temperature in a bit, but those are really easy to give out to anglers and distribute. And if you were to say to an angler, "Hey, can you put this in your live well so we can monitor your live well temperature?" Like that's not a particularly big ask, right? Because it's really small. If we give them an extra water bottle and say, "Hey, can we float this in your live well and measure oxygen?" That's starting to get a little bit intrusive at that point. So I don't think we know a lot about what's going on with oxygen in a live well, but I know that if we're not doing a good job, then that'll be a problem for fish that are being transported. The other one where I think is really fascinating, and I don't think we know a lot about, is temperature. Temperature, if it's high, is bad. We know that part's easy. But the question is, well, what's the temperature inside a live well, and how different is it from the lake where you were catching the fish? Right. And those are two really big questions. Those are important because, you always hear this sort of concept of like, oh, well, the live well heats up, right? Because it's, it's summer, it's whatever, it's Texas, it's 90 degrees. And so and then I get that. But the question is, how different is that live well than the lake? Like you're just pumping the lake water into the boat, right? Is it actually, so assuming anglers are running their live well, does that live well actually heat up? And is warm water in a live well actually a problem? Maybe Lake St. Clair, where you're running a couple of hours, maybe that's a problem. If you've turned off your live well, maybe that's a problem. So I think that becomes a really complicated question. But I think at its base, I'd actually almost like ask you guys for input. Like, how often do anglers run their live wells? Because the stuff that we've done, when we've done it, we've given anglers temperature sensors, and rarely does the temperature, and then we put the temperature sensor in the lake, like in the surface of the lake, not down below the thermocline, in the surface. But at least what we've seen is rarely does the temperature of the live well get warmer than the surface of the lake, because the anglers are they're filling their live wells off the surface of the lake. So almost ask you guys, what have you guys seen? What would you think? And and then how can we get more information on this? Because it, to me, is a little bit of a black box.
Yeah, go ahead, Gary.
Well, what Corey was saying is pretty much what I've done my entire career. I'm one of those anglers that I run my live well from the time I put my first fish in the live well to the time I come to weigh in. Now, when I make a run, my live well's closed off and I recirc, but I constantly have a fresh stream of water coming in all day. Never turn them off. And I've had very good success with all the fish that I've caught. I think that's the problem I've seen with some guys is that they get caught in a situation and they're absent-minded and they don't pay attention. The intakes for your pumps are screened on the bottom of the outside of the boat. And if you get in real heavy aquatic, especially if there's a real heavy algae, you can literally close your entire screen off. Where, yeah, the pump's running, but there's nothing coming inside the boat. That right there gets a little stressful on the fish. If not, you open up the lid and you'll have 5 white ones floating belly up, especially in the summertime. But to me, it's always been the best practice to have good aeration and run it the whole time.
Yeah, and you will see periodically, you will see discussions of icing live wells and dropping that water temperature to try to slow down the stress process. Gary, your experience with ice, what has it been like?
Yeah, my experience with ice is you better really pay attention to, too much ice is not really good on a fish. You drop the temperature that quick, you're talking about putting them in stress. I used to use ice a little bit, but I would make a solution in a live well at the beginning of the day, keep my live well closed off, and then introduce that fish into the solution, and usually only have to add water about halfway through the day. And I had very good success doing that, but I never put 2 bags of ice on a group of fish already in a live well at one time. I've seen other anglers do that. They've had very, very poor results. It doesn't work out good. So, to me, the best thing is just a current flow of outside water on those fish. So you got good oxygen and everything that's taking place. But the live wells, is an issue. And that's one of the things that brought our sport to where it was, because the anglers could catch and bring the fish in before the group and show them off to the crowd. And that's how competitive angling was built. But as we have more users of the resource, more people on the same water bodies, I think it's really important for us to get a good handle on this, because we're all on public waters. And, we want to make sure that everybody has those opportunities to experience what I've experienced on water bodies. So I love this research. I like to see where it's going to lead. If it can lead to where we can put a tool or tools in users' hands to ensure that the fish that are caught or being released are going to be caught again, man, I'd have a big grin on my face. Very important.
Yeah, so I think that's sort of been the message or whatever from all the work that we've done is you can just run your live well. That's the best thing for all kinds of reasons. But again, a big one is, at least from the limited stuff that we've done, there's people put ice in, you're like, why do you put ice in your live well? And I think the answer is like, oh, the live well is going to heat up. I don't see that. You know what I mean? It's if you're running the live well, the fish are in. Now, again, there's certain situations like, where I'm like, whatever, in Lake Ontario, like fishing smallmouth is really deep, and I'm like, okay, maybe. But I think for the overwhelming majority, you're fishing fish out of the surface part where it's warm, and so the temperature of the live well should be the same temperature as where you're catching the fish, right? And what we've seen is if you put ice in your live well, there's a bunch of different things that happen. One is, like Gary said, stress. It's like being in the shower and someone flushes the toilet, right? That temperature shock is like, holy smokes, so there's a lot of that. And then fish are cold-blooded. So the temperature at which they operate and like their heart's beating and all their machinery is working is dependent on the temperature of the water. So if you take a fish that's just been exercised in warm water and it's just had this big disturbance from being exercised, and then you put it in a cold environment, all its machinery is going to slow down. So you can actually prolong the recovery period. So instead of being 2 to 4 hours of recovery, now we're looking at 3 to 5 or 3 to 6 hours, because it recovers slower, because it's cold-blooded. It's cold. Things just aren't working as fast. Like, it's just, the way the animal operates. So in addition to causing a stress, we're starting to prolong the recovery time, and it just takes longer for it to get back to sort of like normal functioning, normal operations.
Makes a lot of sense.
The other thing we've seen now, we just finished the study. I'm literally working with a student on this now. When you take a fish from a cold live well and put it back into its warm lake, that actually is a stressor. We can see that. We can see that signal in the fish where they've gone from just from that cold live well and put it back in the warm lake, basically.
Right.
That's a blip. There's a thing where they're just like, holy, now they've just had this like complete shift from cold to warm.
Yeah, so it's a reverse thermal shock. Like we're going the opposite
Yeah.
direction. That does
Yeah.
make a lot of sense.
And
mean,
we
at
did
this
not know
point,
that we had not appreciated that they're going from that
right?
cold live well back into a warm lake.
Yeah, I think at this point, if you look at the keeping bass alive guide is kind of the standard tournament angler's guide. At this point, the recommendation there is to cool the live well 5 to 10 degrees below surface temperature and maintain it at that or less throughout the day. And I, from like a fish husbandry side, like somebody who buys, sells, moves fish, we do the same thing. We will cool our fish down for transport, but then we warm them up before we put them back in the water. And so there's not knowing every single angler's live well temperature and then getting those fish and putting them through a weigh-in and then putting them in a live release boat or trailer. Like there is several steps of thermal shock that could occur there. So that's really intriguing, Corey.
Yeah. The other thing we did is part of that same study that we're working on is we had a little apparatus where for the most fish can choose the temperature that they want. So we gave them a little choice environment. So there's tanks and they got like there's basically a little narrow neck and they can swim back and forth and choose where they want to go. And we had fish. It's all in Celsius because it's all, I don't know what 15, which is probably about, I don't know, probably about 60, and then probably other fish at about 80. I can't remember what it is. And then we had another group of fish that fluctuated between 60 and 80. But we had 60, say 60 and then 80. And we exercised them like we're catching them, and we put them in a tank. And we said, well, what temperature do you want? Where do you want to be? Instead of us just putting you somewhere, you tell us. And all those fish selected a temperature that's a little warmer than their acclimation temperature. They want to be a little bit warm, not really warm, not crazy warm to the point where it's like starting to be stressful, just a little bit warmer. And for all the fish across both of those groups. So I think what they're doing is, because if they're warmer, they're speeding up a little bit, right? Not a lot. And so it's probably making them recover just a little bit faster, not to the point where things are really starting to become stressful, but they want to be a little bit warmer.
That's exactly what I was going to add. The fish knows best. And he selects that temperature to put himself in a position to recover quick. Quick. Yeah.
Yep.
And that's cool.
Yeah, it was really. I didn't know what we were going to find with that, but we're just crunching the numbers now, so that'll be coming out soon. So
I can't wait for that to come out. We may have to have you back to do like a full in-depth deep dive. Get the grad student on. Let's do the work. Yeah,
so that's why I'm like, this is cool, because it's like I would love to replicate this, say in like Texas, right? I could work with somebody when it is really warm, because I'm a little bit limited. I mean, Illinois, it was warm here. I mean, it wasn't like 100 degrees, and So I'd love to do this at an even warmer temperature with a bigger sample size and different tournament circuits, and say like, what do we want to be doing here? But if the live well temperature doesn't change, and if the problem is that people are just dumping too much ice in, right? So I know that the Keeping Bass Alive guide is like, cool it down a little bit. But if sometimes there's a philosophy of, well, if some is good, then more is better. Then people are like, now you're chilling things down and run the risk of causing problems. I don't know. I mean, I'd love to get more input and maybe, interact with more anglers and get a big group and find out what people are doing. So
yeah, our fishing in Texas in the summertime, it's not uncommon to take off in the morning, surface temps 88. In the afternoon, evening, it'll be 91, 92. I think it's quicker to kill a fish by adding a bunch of ice to it versus just really increasing the flow of water on it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's an argument, I think, to be made for that. You know what I mean? Like, I'd like to, that would be my guess in the long run.
Yeah. Okay, Corey, let's talk about the physical stress indicators that an angler might be able to see in a fish. What are just some of the signs that this fish is stressed? I'm doing something wrong.
So we want to measure stress. That's a good question. So there are, so the easy ones would obviously be if you're like not floating upright, or if you're starting to lose equilibrium and balance, or if you see bellies, like obviously that's a good one. Red fins usually means things aren't doing too well. That's usually a problem. And then, so those are like the easy ones that are, straightforward. Then there are different ways you can sort of, like little tests that you can run that would sort of quantify stress. So like if you just take your fish and flip it over, like just roll it, intentionally roll it onto its back, and then see how quickly it rights itself. Right. If it flips itself back over quickly, it usually probably means it's in good shape. But if it takes a little while to kind of come back, it might not, it's not quite to the point of having lost equilibrium on its own, but it's really probably struggling a bit, and it's, not coming back as fast as it should. So that's a good one. Yeah, those are probably some of the ones that I would recommend. There's a couple of the ones that I think are a little bit less robust, but those are really easy ones that you can look at.
Can you describe to us what is the mode of action that creates the red fins? Like, why do they get red fins?
That's a good question. I'm not sure why. It's blood. Something's bursting. You know what I mean? Like something's bursting and blood's getting in areas that it's not supposed to get into. It's kind of like going into the little between the fin rays.
See, I always
So
thought my theory would be it's like exercise. Your body system is sending blood to your extremities, going, keep these alive, keep these alive. But then, if you're stressed, that's usually the opposite of what happens, right? Like you pull blood to the center of your body to keep you alive. So I don't know.
yeah, I don't know where that comes. But I mean, because we've been places and you can sort of, the blood will come out of the fins, right? And it's not really
Yeah.
supposed to be between the fin rays there. And so I wondered that too. I'm like, why is? I mean, but it's like their fins are all red. And why are they red? Where did that come from? I don't have a good answer.
Yeah, someday we'll dive into that. Okay,
Yeah.
I want to rewind because you said something about air exposure, and I just took a quick note to talk about that. So, air exposure. How long? People always want to take pictures and look at the fish and do that. How long should we honestly have fish out of the water?
Yeah, so it's usually longer is worse, or it's linear. Right? The longer they're out, the less oxygen they're getting. The analogy that I've heard people use is fish gills are kind of would be like a rubber glove. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, if you were to take your rubber glove and kind of inflate it, and so you get that sort of shape. Um, but and the water helps keep all the gill area like separated, right? So their fish gills are really good at getting oxygen out of water, and the water keeps everything kind of separated. So when they come out of the water, everything kind of collapses on itself and kind of imagine again like a rubber glove that's kind of collapsed on itself. So it just doesn't get a lot of oxygen. So how long do you keep it out? Um, that's a good question. A little bit of advice that I've heard before that I think kind of makes sense is keep the fish out of water as long as you would feel comfortable holding your breath. So if you know what I mean, that might be a sort of an easy guide for
Yeah.
people. And that
You got to
way,
get 10 seconds then for these fish.
well, you can always just dunk it back in the water too, right?
Right.
You can always just dunk it back in the water. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean it has
Yeah.
to be released. You just got to just put it back in the water and then give it a moment to sort of almost like catch its breath. And if you're still trying to see how large it is or what do you want to do with it, all that kind of stuff, just put it back and give it a little dunk.
Yeah, that's why we love the catch, weigh, and immediate release format. And I don't remember what the number is, but at one point, Gary, didn't we time how long on average you guys were holding a fish out of the water for that weighing and releasing process?
Yeah, it was like 37 seconds from the time the fish is unhooked, put on the scales, the weight's called, and the fish is released.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's pretty quick. And it's a big one. We do take a picture, so maybe a minute or so. But yeah, it's pretty quick. Hey, Corey, I got a real quick question for you. On the gills, as you were mentioning, there's this old myth out there, and I still see our guys do it, of the fish bleeding in the gills, and they pour a soda pop down the fish's mouth to stop the bleeding. And I have been told by a very reliable source that really what's stopping that blood flow is a flow of water, or the flow is what's clogging that back up. Is there any truth to that, or?
Yeah, I think there's been one study that I know that's kind of looked at that, and that one study did not see support for pouring soda pop on
Soda
gills
pop,
to help
yeah.
it. Yeah. So I mean, I don't really know what the mechanism would be that would cause it to stop. I mean, fish usually are pretty good at clotting. You know what I mean? Obviously, if you get a really bad cut, then it can be really tough for the fish. But for the most part, they're usually pretty good at clotting. They clot pretty quick because then when you live in water, if you got if you're bleeding, it's pretty bad, right? Unlike us, where we can like put pressure on stuff or whatever. You did cut your finger like in the kitchen or
Yep.
something. We can kind of clot pretty quick. But for fish, it should be pretty. So I don't know. Yeah, the limited evidence that I've seen from a like scientific standpoint or from a controlled study standpoint, it said there's really not a lot of support for that.
No. Well, I've had really good success just with water flow.
Yeah.
Just
that's what
keep water flowing over the gills, and it just knocks it back.
what I describe to anglers is how the anatomy of the mouth and the gill works. Is of course the mouth intakes water, it pushes it over the gill. That's how the gill filament is facing the same direction, but the blood flow is actually running in the reverse direction. So that filament is collecting dissolved oxygen and releasing, whatever ammonia or whatever urea is coming out as a waste back into the water. So whenever you have a cut on the gill filament, that blood is coming out the opposite direction. So a flow through the mouth, out the gill of water is a good thing. That's why you'll see fish gasping. They're trying to promote that. So for an angler like Gary, I always say, put the fish back in the water in figure 8 if you're going to try to help, or let it go. The fish will swim off, and that's just how their anatomy is built, is to stop that and clot it with just pressure from the water. All right, Corey. So we've covered why fish strike, the stress that may happen during the actual catch, the stress within the live well. Let's talk about the big subject of tournaments, which for mortality is post-release mortality. Can you give me like a brief history of how studies were put together to look at delayed mortality or post-release mortality? Maybe a definition of even what that is for our audience.
Yeah. So usually the post-release mortality, the classic way to kind of look at it is with net pens, and holding fish in net pens, either at the release point or offshore or what have you. And then you collect tournament caught fish and you put them in there and they get marked. And then normally, if you really want to do it right, you need to have like a control, like a non-tournament caught fish. So then you'll have somebody that'll go electrofishing or something like that, or fish. I guess you can go angling, but without the tournament. The point is, you want to just see what the background mortality is. If you put a fish in there, is it going to die, or is it going to die because it's been through a tournament? So normally you do that, and then you just hold the fish, the tournament caught fish, and your control fish for a period of time, and it kind of varies. It's been kind of all over the map, but 48 to long to 72 hours kind of thing. And then you just, you count which fish is, and you just release them, and whatever you find, which ones are alive and which ones have where the mortalities are. You can compare those two numbers, those proportions usually.
And has your lab done some of those similar studies?
Yeah, so we've done them a bunch of different times, for a bunch of different things, and that's basically the way you kind of run them.
And what are some of the things, especially, our audience is so varied. It's across the country, and it's everything from anglers like Gary who are paying a large entry fee, competing in a tournament that's well organized, down to anglers that maybe it's just 6 or 8, 10 people jackpot tournament. What are some of the things, maybe time of year, selecting the right location, all those things that will increase or decrease the delayed mortality possibility?
The big one, the one that has probably the biggest impact, is temperature and water temperature. With higher temperatures causing higher mortality rates. And that's pretty ubiquitous and pretty common across everywhere. It's tough to identify a like hard and fast cutoff and I don't really know if we can say, draw a line and be like, above this, they're going to die, or below, because again, in Texas, like the fish, the water temperature is going to be, creeping up on 90. That's just the way those fish are. And that's what they've sort of been experiencing. And then you can have things like, was the fish caught late in the day? Was it caught early in the day? How much running was that? How was the live well? What else? So there's a bunch of different factors that kind of go on top of that can increase or decrease overall rates. But by and large, water temperature is arguably the number one driver of all of that.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. Corey, tell us about maybe some of those experimental procedures that you've put together that have just been very surprising in your career, something that you didn't think was going to be this fun, but is just absolutely fun to research.
A fun one. Well, the angling, why fish at fishing lures, why bass at fishing lures, that was a cool one. That was really
Of course,
neat.
yeah.
I didn't know what was going to come from that. And so that one was surprising and interesting. We've done some stuff is more with like bluegill. And so we did stuff with like, I had a student a bunch of years ago that was really into this topic. And so he would do stuff with, he looked at intelligence basically. You have smart fish and you have fish that are, like for a better word, kind of dumb. And we can quantify like learning and ability to learn. And so you take a fish tank basically, and you put a divider in the middle of the fish tank, and you put a hole in the divider, and you put a bluegill on one side, just whatever side, doesn't really matter. And you walk up to the bluegill and you shine a flashlight on the bluegill while he's in the tank, and you put a small little net, like an aquarium net, in there, and you chase the bluegill until he goes through the hole. And once they go through the hole, you're done. Leave it. Come back the next day. Shine the flashlight, chase him with a net till he goes through the hole. Leave them, come back, and you just keep doing that. And eventually, for some of the fish, when you start walking up, they go through the hole and they just know that, like, yep, I know what's coming. And other fish, that doesn't really matter. So you can basically quantify their ability to learn in some of the smarter or the dumber fish within the population. And then you take a whole bunch of those fish and you throw them in a pond, and then you go fishing. You say, well, who do we catch out of the pond? And you actually catch the smart fish that kind of come out of the pond. I'm not really too sure why, but there was a clear, like, yeah, you actually catch the smart fish in the pond. And the ones that and maybe smart isn't the right word. The ones that learn more quickly,
right,
are the ones that we actually catch.
See, that is cool and fun research.
Yeah.
I want to give you one of mine. I'm such a nerd. I've read a ton of your articles. One of my favorites is one that you did with David Phillip, and Bailey met David at Black Bass 2025. But it was about angling vulnerability of nesting largemouth and smallmouth, like comparing them and what are the conditions. Will you, just for our audience, kind of talk about, I mean, let's just be honest, our audience needs to hear about what is the whole process of catching a bass off a nest and what does it do to the nest. We want to hear that part, but also how do you compare largemouth and smallmouth in an experiment like that?
So that was a lot of that came from the fact that there's differences in regulations during spring, right? When males are guarding their nest, some areas males are protected, some areas they're not. So what does that mean? And is that even a big deal? And what is that, why would fish hit a lure and why would they not, and all that kind of stuff. So basically that was done in Ontario. And we would go to lakes where fish were nesting in the shores, and the water there is really clear. So you can kind of see the fish, right? So they're there. And we would, first thing we did was we'd be snorkeling because we're, not that deep. And you take a bluegill model, like a picture of a bluegill that's on a stick, and you can put the bluegill model in the nest and pretend that the bluegill is like eating eggs. And then you count or quantify how aggressive the nesting bass is towards the bluegill model. So you can basically sort of say, is it an aggressive nest defender or a non-aggressive nest defender? And then we do that for a bunch of fish, and then you get in a boat and you go fishing and you see who you catch. And basically what we saw, whether it be smallmouth or largemouth, doesn't really matter. The fish that you catch while they're guarding nests are larger, older dads that are more aggressive defenders of their babies, basically, and that have more offspring in the nest. So if you're a small little pipsqueak dad that does not have very many offspring, you're younger, you just don't care as much and you're not going to strike a lure. But if you're a big sort of bruiser dad that has a lot of offspring, a lot of babies, arguably closer to the end of your life, where you might not have as many reproductive opportunities left, then you're going to defend your nest a little bit better. And you don't really differentiate that bluegill on a stick from a fishing lure. So those are the ones you probably catch. So we didn't really quantify. It's not really fair in a way to compare largemouth bass and smallmouth bass on a nest, because smallmouth have fewer eggs, but they're a lot bigger and they're just generally more aggressive parents. And largemouth bass, like their eggs are smaller and they don't really seem to be as aggressive as nest defenders relative to smallmouth. But that pattern was the same. If you're a big older dad with lots of offspring and a great potential return, like great potential fitness, then you're going to defend your offspring.
Gary, does that not sound like something I would make Kenyon and Tommy go do?
Oh, exactly. Yeah. That has you guys written all over. I'd like to be a part of that too. It is. That's the type of thing that's always attracted me to, like Corey and Stephen. You guys got so much experience below the surface. All my experience has been above the surface, and with rod, reel, line, lure, and catching. Same thing that Bailey's experiencing. It's completely different when you go below the surface and you start, understanding and learning the fish in their environment, and that has really added to my passion for fishing and passion for being able to observe and participate in catching the fish. Different species of fish too. I don't really have a preference, largemouth, smallmouth, or spotted bass. I like catching them all.
Gary, I'll give you an opportunity. If, you've got Corey here with you. If you want to ask him any questions about fish care or get some advice, I'll give you that opportunity.
Well, Mike, I've got a lot of questions and we could continue to talk forever, but we're on these public water bodies and we're talking about, public that's buying a fishing license, contributing, and now for them to experience the recreation of catching fish. And I know from working with Stephen that it's harder to manage a public water body than it is a private water body. It's on a completely different level. But I also see too that on the more that we work to preserve these fish and these fisheries, that I think we need to continue to educate so that we can have a harvest. Because if we got to 100% release, I think that would harm some of the water bodies that we fish all the time. Fortunately, some of the water bodies, especially in your part of the country, you talk about the Great Lakes an awful lot, which I love it up there, are massive water bodies. And, those are very hard to control. You just don't see results that quick. But the fascinating thing for me in some of the stuff that we're talking about is the personality of the fish and how that personality reacts to condition changes. Whether, I would say that I've seen smallmouth react a little bit different than largemouth, spotted bass same, but still the overall, it's kind of the same.
Mm-hmm.
Live well stress is very important to me. I think we, as the sport continues to evolve, is going to get better at giving these fish a better experience, if that makes sense, in the live well and during the ride. Because I know that I've pushed it a lot on my times because the fishing's good and I want to make the very last cast. And then you get caught in a jam when you come around a corner and you got 2-foot waves. And you got to get in. So you do what you can to get in, but when you open up the live well, those fish are all red finned. I've seen this in really all three species, but I've also noticed too that when you come in and they're stressed, man, I'm dumping the fresh water to them. My live well now is full. My boat's sitting stationary. How quick that color comes back and how quick those fish recover. I think the other area that we could really educate is on the bladder of a fish, because I see some anglers trying to use weights on the bottom fins. So if they catch a that is bloated, he at least stays upright in the live well. but they don't understand the pressure is up against their
Mhm.
organs.
Mhm.
Quicker you can release that pressure, then I think the quicker that fish is going to recover.
Mhm.
I still think there's a lot of education, especially I know Steve and I are,
Mhm.
with the air bladder, through the mouth, through the side, what's the best way? And everybody has
Mhm.
an opinion. I think we need to really come to terms on the
Mhm.
easiest way for the average angler, because
Mhm.
not all anglers like to catch and kill and eat all the fish that they
Mhm.
catch. We do like to eat a few because they do taste good and they're very healthy. But yeah, no, I mean, I love the conversation, and to be around somebody like yourself. And of course, Stephen experiences this with me all the time. Your minds are working, what ifs and how comes. And Stephen and I
Mhm.
drive down the road, and, a 15-hour trip is gone pretty quick because we're pretty deep into conversation. And it's
Mhm.
fun to see more individuals becoming involved in our community on how we can make it better.
Mhm.
What can we do to improve? And I think, the best fishing is still yet to come, even though it's still in the same water bodies.
Mhm.
So that's kind of my take on everything.
I love it.
And I like, I appreciate the opportunity to interact because I mean, every time I do these kinds of things or interact with anglers, whatever, I learn a whole bunch too. And I learn, what some of the issues are. I get it's just a cool different perspective, like talking about live wells and fish care and how do you what's it like in reality. It's one thing for me to sort of run sort of a little simulation and do things as best I can, but sometimes I'm like, I don't know if this is the best thing I can do. Right? Maybe there's something I can do better. What can we kind of put our heads together and like how can we change things. One thing I thought, and I don't even know if this is possible, but I mean this is something that's occurred to me. How can we design boats so they can draw water when they're running and or on plane?
They already have that.
Yeah. Okay. So then then you can run and see, I didn't know that. See, but
Mhm.
the point is you can run and now we're not having to have the live wells lose water while you're running.
Exactly. No, they have a fill system. I know Camus offers it on all their boats. And I'm not promoting Camus, but there's probably others. That's what I run. That's what I'm familiar with. And it's a little down lip that drops down below the bottom of the boat, and it does backfill while you're running,
Yeah.
which is great because, again, it's another option.
Yeah.
Another
Like it.
option.
Yeah.
All right, I got one more. I'm sorry, Corey. This is your first time on. You'll realize I just always have questions. But as you were as you were just stating, that this experience for you gives you the ability to kind of grab new things. I think our audience maybe doesn't quite understand why research selects certain areas to pursue while ignoring other areas. Um, so, in some way, could you explain to us from a university level how is research done, and like who comes up with the ideas, and how's it funded, and why do we pick certain areas? Like on
Yeah.
the
That's a good.
broadest topic.
Yeah, that's a good one. So and it's going to vary from like area to area and like region to region and sort of like state to state and like school to school, but so there's a lot of variability there. I think some of the best projects come up. I think there's kind of two ways. One is interacting with like managers like DNR, for example. And I know some of the stuff that we've done, some of the tournament stuff that we talk where we're actually able to put temperature loggers into live wells. And a lot of the origin of that project and sort of that concept and being able to go to that reservoir and do that work that came from the district biologist who's saying, I'm wondering about this. Like I'm sort of seeing this or seeing that. We actually did a project where we looked at cull tags and sort of the impacts of cull tags on some
Mm-hmm.
of the fish, and that came from the district biologist because he basically was saying like, I think there's a lot of yeah, and he's like, I think there's some problem because they'll go shocking and they'll just see fish with jaw injuries, right? And so he's sort of like, is this as bad as I think it is, or is this actually okay, or what's the status there? So I think one or way that we get projects is from folks like DNR and the biologists and the folks that are sort of on the ground that are, actually seeing the fish and handling fish and interacting with anglers and that kind of stuff. And then sometimes it's just the researcher just having just a wacky idea, just sort of a harebrained, half-baked, like, I wonder if this is something, that we can look at. And so, and sometimes it comes from the students. And so, the students are actually really good too. And they'll just be, because they sort of are immersed in it and they're reading the papers and they're kind of, going for it. And I like this, the study with the bluegill, what they're looking at intelligence or learning. That was my student. He came up with that all on his own. And he was like, I think this would be a really cool idea. So he's in it and he's living it. Like, that's his job, right? Like, basically, like, every day, all day, and he rolls out of bed, and that's what he's thinking about. So he can kind of come up with some stuff. So when you get an environment where all those ideas are contributing, and you get really bright folks that are working really hard and are really passionate, and they're interacting with DNR, and they're in that environment, I think that's sort of the way we get a lot of those really good ideas.
This question's your fault because you mentioned it in our audience. Somebody's commenting already. Stephen, please ask him, what was the cold tag study and what are the results?
See it now.
So we looked at sort of what are the impacts, I guess, what is the impact of cold tags? What's the sort of the, different kinds of cold tags and different styles of cold tags and that kind of stuff. And so we had, there's probably about 4, like the ones that a small clip on the lip, a bigger clip on a lip, sort of a lasso that went around around the tail. I think there was one more, and just like what happens, and is there any relationship with mortality or injury and all that kind of stuff. So we got fish. We actually went out and we got wild caught fish because we didn't want to do 10-inch fish from the hatchery. You can't really do that with a 6-inch hatchery fish. So we actually went out to a reservoir. We had to work with the biologist, and we shocked up some fish and we used them, and we just put tags on them. We had, again, Rubbermaid tubs that were pretend live wells, and kept them in there. And every now and again, we kind of disturbed them. We picked them up. We picked them up with a tag and sort of did what I hope was representative of a fishing tournament. And the good news is that there was no mortality. So the cold tags did not directly result in mortality. But what we did find is that, especially if there's the string, it was a stringer style where you kind of puncture and go through the lip. Those ones, actually, we saw some injuries with that, from the tags, from stringer style. And the lip clip ones had the lowest impact, and the ones that were a lasso, a lot of those just kind of fell off. So they had the least impact. They really also sort of didn't do their job, and that might have just been the brand that we picked, because we just got something out of the catalog and we just ordered some stuff. We kind of did what we thought was close. But yeah, that was the big thing, was the stringer style ones caused injury. But the thing that came out of that we really didn't appreciate was just going shocking in that reservoir. About a third of the fish had a pre-existing jaw injury before we even started the study. So, and a lot of those were like, yeah, that was like, just the membrane would be ripped. They just have a hole in the membrane. Well, that fish has probably had a stringer style tag on it before we got it from a previous tournament. So that was the big thing we saw, was like, there's probably more fish out there than we appreciate that has some injuries. And so just saying, the punchline to the study was like the stringer style tag.
Wow.
Well, Corey, but then, that kind of leads me to the question of, if that's what you experienced, so catch and release is a good thing because those fish were healthy and they had been enjoyed by somebody else.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And there was no mortality. So then we put those guys into net pens and we monitored them for a while, and everybody survived. A couple of them got out, so it was all good. But the point was, there's, in terms of injury, and it was the stringer style tag. But you're right. There was this fish that survived and they were good. And catch and release is like, fish are pretty robust and they should be fine.
Well, that I really appreciate you taking the interest in fish, because, it's a sport that has been very good to me. But we also are very fortunate that the largemouth, the smallmouth, and the spotted bass are such a hardy breed of fish that allows the anglers to use a variety of lures to play off the personalities, but it allows us to bring them in, take pictures, weigh them, and release them with very little mortality. So it's a very hardy species of fish. Very fortunate.
I got one for all three of you guys, if we still got time here, Steve.
I got time.
So I'd love to go around to the three of you and basically just ask for one big mistake you guys think that anglers are still making just in the broad topic of fish care in general, whether they're catch and release for tournament, but a big mistake that's still the majority of anglers are doing? You might not have one. That's okay. I'm just wanted to put it out there as we're here to be educating anglers. But and Gary,
Gary, you want
I
to
hear
go
the
first?
laughing, so I'm gonna I'll throw you the bone to go first because I'm assuming you got something.
Well, I tell you, the one thing that I see anglers at my level still make the biggest mistake is by fizzing through the mouth.
Mm.
Yeah, you can be really good at it and do it, but if you miss, it's not good on the fish. Side entry is better.
That's a
I've
good one.
only ever seen, I think, in person the mouth fizzing. I think once it was an older gentleman who guides out of the St. Lawrence River do it. And I saw him doing that. I'm like, I don't ever want. He's like, you want to try this? I'm like, I don't want. No, I'm good. I'm gonna stick with the side. Like, I was never good at the game surgeon, so let's just let's stick with
Hey,
the side.
I've observed some things where I just, I call Steven up and just shake my head, where I watch him on a release boat, and I'm just, just me, I'm just kind of hanging out, and I'm curious. They poke that needle in the mouth, and they hold that fish with that needle in it until there's not one bubble that comes out.
Ooh.
And when they release the fish, it just goes to the bottom of the tank. And I'm like, whoa, there was one event where I kind of stepped in and, anyhow, I just hate to see that, because they're such a precious fish.
So that's a great opportunity to stop right there for a second. Is for people that are learning to fizz, or maybe like fizzing, all they know how to, where to put the needle, but from like we were talking about, like maybe they were taught that you take the needle out when you stop seeing bubbles, because there's definitely some people that are like that. What is the correct form when you're seeing that fish being fizzed? Like, when is a good time to pull the needle out?
Well, to me, I've always pulled the needle out after when you first puncture something that's really got a lot of pressure on it, you're going to get an initial surge of bubbles that come out real fast. And then once that stream slows up, that's when I pull the needle out. Because you want to leave air in there.
Yeah.
All right, if we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it right. So on a bass, and it's not universal for all fish species, but on a bass, the swim bladder, which is what helps the fish with buoyancy to stay upright and for its position in the water column, the swim bladder is not filled by gulping air directly. It is not an open cavity. They can't just open their mouth and fill it. It is filled with gas that we theorize is coming from bloodstream and filling. So as a fish is brought from depth, usually, the pressure of that gas in the swim bladder changes and allows it to expand. As it expands, it can only go into the abdomen because it's muscle and bone above it and its skull in front of it. So it has to go into the abdomen. That means it puts pressure on all of the organs and pressure forward onto the heart. There is not a way to go through the mouth without puncturing some other organ to get to the swim bladder because they're being compressed against the gullet. So side fizzing is the only option if you want to go through muscle into the swim bladder. You should puncture on the side through the swim bladder with the fish underwater so that you can observe the bubbles coming out. You should be loosely holding the fish in your hand, and you should continue until the fish can keep itself upright. Then you should remove it. This is seconds, not a minute. You should not be pushing on the fish at all. You should be letting the fish in your hand. So if I were an angler and I wanted to learn how to do this, I would look up a person named Barb Elliott on YouTube. Search for Barb Elliott. Or go to Barb's Best. Dang it! Pause. I'm grabbing my fizz kit. It won't take me but a second.
We'll have the link for all that, of course, in the show notes for
I
posts.
told you it will take one second. Here's Barb's best.
You just have
fish
those
kit.
stationed around your house in random locations?
In case you catch a fish that needs to be fizzed.
What if you need to fizz something in your living room? I don't understand.
Feel bad for your animals, Steve.
Barb's Best Fizz Kit, and she has a Facebook page, facebook.com/barb.elliot.127. You can go to, there is a website though, barbsbestfishkit.com, and you can order these, and they're only like $10 or something. They're not expensive.
And does it have a picture of a bass? Did I see a picture of a bass? You got like landmarks and everything on there, like where?
Yeah, I'll open it up for you. Yeah, so this is a. Let's see. This is smallmouth, and it tells you how many scales to count. And then on the reverse side, there's your largemouth, because it's slightly different. A smallmouth, you're going to want to get closer to that dorsal fin. Largemouth is further back. And that's just so that you can actually hit the swim bladder more easily. But yeah, Barb's got that. She's got her instructions. She also, in this fizzing kit, this is why I love it. She folds a ring for you so that you can clean your needle out. So after you puncture, you can clean your needle out, but it acts as a stopper. So you can actually put this in your fish, then remove the stopper, let the bubbles come back out, then put the stopper back in to where you can manually stop all these things from happening, and then pull the needle out and seal it up. And it comes in a nice little carrying case. 2 needles, 2 stoppers. Barb's Best Fizz Kit.
Well, and a little pro tip for people too: if you're traveling after fizzing fish, don't take that into TSA, because you'll get the weirdest look when you forget to take it out. Yeah, that was a weird explanation to the lady working TSA to explain to her that it was not for any other use besides fish.
Yeah, and I like to tell people also, you only have 2 needles here. You can clean them. Of course, she has the stopper to get any kind of organic matter out of the center. But the needles are going to get dull over time, so it should not be like universal for the rest of your career. Is these 2? You should replace them anytime the needle starts to fold at all. You can put alcohol on them, but they need to completely dry before you puncture another fish. So I would almost rather you not try to introduce alcohol into the swim bladder. That is a very sterile environment. So I'd rather you use your needle, let it air dry, and rotate through. Dr. Susky, do you have anything you want to add to the fizzing conversation?
Not really. I think that all sounds good to me. I mean, I know that's a real problem when fish are not able to get back down to depth or be upright. And so, yeah, I like the fact that it's got a little landmark to help people see where to puncture, especially if you haven't done it before or trying to. You don't want people going to the wrong spot, right? So I think that's really good.
All right. Do you want to answer Bailey's question? The original question was, what do you think the number one mistake anglers are still making is in fish care?
So, okay, that's a good question. So I like this is good. I think that mouth fizzing, that's a good one. We kind of talked about temperature. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of icing. But one of the ones that I hadn't talked about that might be interesting is excessive oxygen and oxygen infusion systems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a situation. And again, I don't know how prevalent or not prevalent this is, but I know it's prevalent at some degree. But I don't know if it's like common enough to bother talking about, but because we've done a little bit of work on this. Fish obviously need oxygen, but this is a case, I think, where the mentality of, well, if some is good, then more is better, right? If people turn on oxygen, just let it kind of run. And I think what happens, the little bit I've interacted with anglers is, people seem to like it because fish get really calm in the live well when there's like lots and lots of oxygen. So there are people that I think are pro oxygen. And oxygen infusion, like just a bottle of oxygen and an air stone, and you're just bubbling it in, right? That's what I'm talking about. The reason that we as like humans breathe is because we get a buildup of carbon dioxide, right? So we have carbon dioxide sensors, and those carbon dioxide sensors tell our brain, hey, we got to breathe. The reason that fish breathe or move their operculum and pump water with their gills is an absence of oxygen. So it's a different mechanism. So they breathe when there's no oxygen.
Huh.
So if you take a fish and you put it in a high oxygen environment, there's no motivation for it to breathe.
Mm.
So fish in a live well with really high oxygen will stop breathing.
Wow.
And
So
we've done this a lot, and you can count apercular beats, right? Because you can count the beats. And if you put them in a really high oxygen environment, those apercular beats slow way down.
Mm.
And so now the fish is not excreting carbon dioxide. It's not excreting ammonia. It's not obtaining oxygen, and it's not pumping water over the gills, as Steve was saying, to get all those things going.
Mm.
So I would say that a mistake is to have really high oxygen. Oxygen is good. We need oxygen. Don't get me wrong, but I'm talking really high, uncontrolled oxygen infusion systems where there's just tons and tons of bubbles and it's really high oxygen. And if you look at the fish and you say, "Oh, look how calm it is," it's just sitting. Like, well, yeah, the fish is like, for the most part, it's basically starting to suffocate.
This is one of the places where I've been such a huge jerk. I mean, even to Bailey before. Whenever, an oxygen machine comes out and he'll text me and be like, "Look at this thing, isn't it great?" And I'm like, "I'll tell you it's great when you can tell me how much oxygen your fish need. If you can just tell me parts per million, how many you need, then we're on to something. Then you're going to have to explain to me how you're going to measure it." Because, on the commercial side, we haul fish all the time. And we have oxygen meters, we have regulators, and we're monitoring that oxygen. And I've had young employees kill fish with too little oxygen, just as frequent as too much oxygen. And even the type of diffuser you're using changes the size of that bubble. The depth of the live well changes how that bubble reacts in the water column. And you got to really know what you're doing if you're going to add oxygen. And this is my bigger complaint about tournament fishing is Gary Klein, one of the best anglers that ever lived. Why do we also have to find out how good he is at transporting fish?
That's the future of fishing. Catch and release.
Yep.
Catch and an immediate release. That way we're not moving concentrations of fish, relocating.
Yep. Okay, Bailey, my answer, biggest mistake I see is anglers don't understand that the most dangerous part of a tournament for a fish is actually the time it spends in a live well bag, in the weigh-in bag, especially whenever we have events that don't have the correct infrastructure. So you put 5 gallons of water in a bag. It's a little heavy. You pour some out, you put your fish in there, and then you carry them up and you stand around for 10 minutes. Your fish were alive and they were going to do really well. But because you wanted a lighter weigh-in bag, because you're going to have to stand in line, and because that line took so long without the right infrastructure, your fish, that 10 minutes is what are going to kill them in that weigh-in bag.
I think that might be a big eye opener, especially to our tournament folk. Is that?
Yep.
Honestly, all of them too, especially like the oxygen aspect, where there's been a lot of new products that are pushed out there talking about oxygen and not really any specific data behind it. To your guys' point, I think there's going to be. I'm looking forward to the comments on this one to see what some people's feedback is going to be. But this is why. But that's good though. This is how we educate. This is how it's just we have the funnest part of anglers are the most stubborn people alive and trying to convince them. But hey, somebody's got to do it, right? We're trying to be the bridge. So
we're the bridge.
I love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we can't end a show without first asking Corey, is there anything the angling community can do to A, help you, or B, volunteer to be part of any of your studies? They probably don't want to be the ones that hold their breath for a long time, but
give blood. Yeah, no, we don't. No, I don't. At the moment, I don't see. It's bigger than me. I think if what I would say is if there's an opportunity, or if there's an opportunity for an angler or an angling organization, or to work with a researcher and to try and get some data, anglers usually are good. They want to do the right thing. We've always had really, really good success. But I think I would just say keep that going. Like, try and help folks out if you can, and participate and join them, whether that be just a survey, like sort of giving your opinion and like, how did it go? And, how long did you fish and all like those types of like things, or if it's possible, if somebody wants like help catching fish or help with whatever, any other aspect or those kinds of, I think that would be a big help. And that's just bigger than me. That's just to help generate the research to try and do things right, to try and maybe change, whether it be policy or just best practices, or if it ends up in a little thing like the fizz kit, you know what I mean? There's got to be some data behind that somewhere. It'd be nice to take that concept and say, well, let's work together and try and generate the next fizz kit for the next issue and try and make things better.
I love that. I love that because we've said it multiple times on this show, but anglers are so quick to complain about a certain thing that they've noticed issue wise or what have you, regionally, locally. But then when you have opportunities to have volunteer, have participation, it's ghost town. So I challenge that to, before anybody complains about an issue or complains about their fishery, if you're not also volunteering or sharing your voice, then it's shouldn't be the one complaining. But
Yeah.
I love that. Awesome. Steve, you got anything else for him?
No, so happy. Well, Corey, where can people find you?
So if you just type me into Google, you'll get my website for university. I don't actually have any social media accounts,
Okay.
but so just go through that. And then my email is on there. Send me an email. I'm always happy to interact or chat or discuss things or whatever.
And
like I said, I've always found it really interesting to do these things.
Do you have any of your articles open source for people?
Yeah, I had to change. It's a long story, but I had to change my website. So I'm slowly adding articles. So it's a little bit behind, but I will get them added over time, over the next little while. And so yeah, keep checking back, and they're there. And I'll do my best to share them, and I can try and get as many things online as I can.
That's great. So yeah, so for our audience, an open source scientific article means you could go to the website, you can click it, you can read the PDF right there. You don't have to have some sort of subscription. You don't have to pay an additional fee. Some of these, articles may cost you $20, $30 to read one time. So having it available open source, you guys don't realize, but that is a huge, huge asset to you.
Love it. Corey, if you're good with it, then for the folks that are tuning in, whether it's on audio or YouTube, we'll attach your email to this if they're
that'd be great. Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, folks, obviously you guys can find that in the notes, but Steve, man, anything else for the folks?
It's been a great show as always. We really appreciate you both. We'll have you back on. If there's anything we can do for you, just holler.
All right, folks, that is going to do it for today's episode. And again, thank you to Mr. Gary Klein and Corey Susky. As I mentioned, there was probably a good, 12 different topics within that episode that we dived down, Steve, that we could have been all their own 2-3 hour episode in itself.
Yeah, here's what I appreciate. Number one, anybody who can talk the science without making it too scientific to where we can all understand it. I love that. And to not dive so far deep into it that we all get bored. Like, that was entertaining. To me, that was so much fun. Yeah. And I've been reading Corey's work. He said this is what's weird. He said, I've been here in Illinois as a professor for 19 years. And I thought to myself, crap, I have been reading your work for 19 years. Because we are on the same timeline. So I'm like, oh no. So it's kind of like, for me, one of those people that I want to get in his boat and I want an autograph.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that makes, he said, he's like, wow, it's been 19 years. But you say that too. That means you're dating yourself now, Steve.
Yeah, that's all right. That's all right.
I say that out of jest, but no, it was, I want to go read some of these studies now. So I might have to pick your brain on some of the top ones to go read, but he brought some of that information from his, those studies into this conversation.
And, well, listen, like he was talking about and it's not a spoiler because everybody's already heard it. He's talking about these pictures of these bluegill, and think about me at 22 years old, and I'm reading an article of a biologist who's snorkeling with a picture of a bluegill on a stick and harassing bass, and I'm like, now that is the dream job. How do you get to be that guy? Somebody's
Yeah.
paying you
You get paid for that?
to put a bluegill on a fake bluegill on a stick and swimming around a bass's bed. Like, dude, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Cool.
I'm game for that. I don't know if I can do the whole scuba diving with tarpon at 30 feet in the middle of the night, but I can do the whole swimming with bass on bed with bluegill on the end of a stick.
We're going again. We booked a trip in December, so we got to get some episodes in the can because
Oh boy,
I got to go out of town. Yeah, we got to go.
Well, Godspeed.
Well, you'll know if 2026 rolls around and it's just Bailey here. You'll know.
Yeah, tarpon ate Steve. Oh man. Well, dude, all seriousness, great episode. I will love to hear people's feedback. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of tournament folks that listen to this, non-tournament folk alike, because a lot of this fish care stuff doesn't. I know there was a lot of tournament talk, but a lot of it does still apply to the angler, whether you're boat, bank, kayak, on caring for that fish, making sure that fish can go and be caught another day by someone else, and
Right.
to be able to prosper. But hopefully you guys took something from that, but I want to hear you guys' feedback. So whether it's you're listening on podcasts and you can, I know like Spotify, you can leave comments as many of you have done before. Feel free to drop that feedback there. Send us an email, send Steve an email, send us a DM, or obviously if you're in the YouTube, drop it in the comments below. But some awesome stuff, and obviously looking forward to the next time we have Corey, obviously Gary as well, on the show again here down the road.
Hey, that's the other thing. Tell me, do you like hearing from these professors? We've had a lot of fisheries managers on. Do you like professors that are like doing the research? And if so, is there research topics that you want us to go straight to the source for? We can do that.
Love it. I think anybody that has the credentials, not some random person who's never actually studied the biology of a bass that puts their angler theory out in a comment section. I enjoy hearing from people that have the credentials for this stuff.
I enjoy hearing from them all. I love the people who have no formal education that are just observing, because they truthfully are doing science as long as they're willing to pressure test it.
Right.
If you observe something once and say this is what's happening and that becomes your gospel, that's a little different. But if you're willing to sit on the water and observe and create a theory and then test that theory and then pressure test that theory in conversations and communication and come back out and say, now I think it's this, like those are my people. And those are the people that I love having conversations with, because at the end of the day, anybody could become a biologist. Literally, the next time I have a biologist position open at Texas Pro Lake, you could apply, Bailey, and I could hire you. And the second I hire you, you're technically a biologist because I hired you as one.
You wouldn't like that. There would be no work done. I'd just be fishing everybody's private pond.
We'd have hella good content, though.
You'd have content. No work would be done. Oh, that's
Bailey. Why don't I fish?
hear you there.
I have no idea because I've tried to hook them all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I will edit my statement by saying, if you're stuck in if you say, no, you're wrong, but you're not willing to see another point of view or discuss why, and specifically some of the people in these comment sections that have believed a certain thing for 30 plus years, those I'm not willing to hear from. I mean, I'm willing to hear from everybody, but I'm not willing to discuss anything with somebody that isn't willing to, you know exactly what I'm saying. But either way, long story short, great episode. And I think it's time for a Lake Hotline.
Absolutely. Launch the graphic.
All right. There you go. Boom, boom, pow. Hopefully I remember to launch the graphic. Otherwise, for the YouTube folk, it doesn't make any sense. But we have two for you guys today. And with that being said, we have had so much from you guys, emails, DMs, and some different comments, obviously, on the YouTube videos to use as lake hotline questions, which thank you guys for that. With that being said, we will have a full-on Q&A show with Steve and I here coming up soon, as well as some other ideas we have in the hopper to bring you guys here shortly before Steve goes and swims with tarpon. But to kickstart that, the one we have to start with today is from Chuck and Fish on Instagram. He's asking, do bass really feed up for winter, or do they get fat because lower water temps slow their metabolism?
That's a great question. Let's start with summer. So as we go through summer, a fish has a very fast metabolism, and most likely it is in an environment with a water temperature that is so high that it's not actively growing. So it consumes food, and that food digests quickly, and it's just in the basic survival mode. At some point, we hit fall. And as fall starts to progress, water temperatures drop into, for Texas, the low 80s, high 70s. And then as we move through fall, we get to the low 70s and the low 60s. That's fall. During that time, your fish, as they consume food, they gain weight. They gain weight because now they're in the optimal growth temperature for that region. For you guys, you're further north, so your fall happens faster. So this window is shorter. Fish are not gaining fat. They're not putting on fat deposits to store for winter because they don't need to do that. Their metabolism shifts with their temperature, so their metabolism will slow down over winter. They don't need fat deposits like we would think of a mammal needing. Okay, so because of this, the term feeding up may not be the right one. I like using it. They're more aggressively feeding in the fall, and they're gaining weight. That weight is actually muscle mass and egg mass because they're going to start producing the eggs that they will use in the spring.
Yeah.
So if they're female, so they're gaining weight at that time. That's feeding up. You see them more aggressive, consuming more forage. That's because they're now back in the optimal growth temperature. As we get into winter, then their feeding slows down. But we have to define these seasons with some sort of temperature value to say if they're feeding up or not. So the answer is yes, they feed up, which just actually means they become more actively feeding and actually grow.
Yeah. Love it. Well, there you go. Our second one is a little bit more, we'll detail his specific situation, but this question I think could be posed as a whole. But it's from Owen Cup, sent us an email and said, there's a lake here in northeastern Indiana called Sylvan Lake. It's a 670 acre impoundment with lots of shallow cover like grass laydowns, lily pads, docks. Sylvan recently got its yearly walleye survey, and the biologist sampled gizzard shad in high abundance for the first time ever. Sylvan has never had gizzard shad in it except for last year when they surveyed exactly one gizzard shad, and this year they've found hundreds of thousands of shad schools. I'm curious on how all of this will affect the growth and populations of bass, walleye, perch, etc. So I guess essentially asking if there's been an introduction of gizzard shad, and how does that affect the ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a pretty dynamic question. We'll start with 600-ish acres. It's a small impoundment. So the introduction of a new species has a greater impact than it would on a large reservoir or natural body of water that's a larger size. If we're talking 10,000 acres, the introduction of a single fish may or may not have a large impact, and it'll depend on when they actually hit a density that could cause that impact based on the surface area. But 600 acres, it's a smaller environment. These little changes can have kind of ripple impacts. The gizzard shad is native to North America, but they're not native in every watershed. When they're introduced, gizzard shad, as a general rule, they're omnivores, so they can consume multiple different things. When they're in the water column, they consume plankton. primarily zooplankton or large macroinvertebrates. They can also shift to feed on the bottom, and they consume detritus. Detritus is decaying organic material on the bottom. This also could include any detritivores, things like insects that may live on the bottom. They can consume those as well. So they can feed in multiple stages of the water column and use the environment in a different way. Most fish species cannot do this. They have one method which they consume forage, and that's the process they use, and they use it all the time. So gizzard shad can shift. Gizzard shad can technically hybridize with a threadfin shad. It is rare, but it does happen in the wild. And in theory, if that fishery had threadfin shad, they are now unfortunately going to have some hybridization occurring. Gizzard shad eventually can grow to a very large size. So as this initial introduction occurs, you have juvenile gizzard shad. Maybe they saw one or two, then they see schools. And as they see these schools, that's an increase in forage. You're going to have a predatory fish species that figures out how to leverage that new forage item. And you're going to see that specific predator improve in quality of both in a number and individual size. It's just going to happen. They have a new food source. They're figuring out how to use it. They're going to do better. That could be walleye. That could be largemouth. That could be smallmouth. It's going to be something, and it's going to be fairly temporary because that abundance of good small to medium forage from the gizzard shad is going to go away pretty quickly. And I guess whenever I say that, 4 or 5 years, right? Like it's not going to happen for the next 2 or 3 decades. What's going to happen is over time, large gizzard shad will develop, and I'm talking individuals 18 to 24 inches. Those are going to act in the system more like a common carp, but they can continue to feed on that plankton. As there's large individuals that are feeding on plankton, they're directly competing with juvenile fish, including your juvenile predators. So over a long enough timeline, the gizzard shad could start to accumulate a biomass of large individuals that are not easily caught by predatory fish that are competing against small juvenile predatory fish. That will cause the biomass to shift to where more of the fish in the lake are gizzard shad and less of the fish are the generations of predatory fish. So you're going to see initially things look great. The gizzard shad introduction means the fish are fatter and there's more of them, and that's cool. And then over a long enough timeline, you're going to see that there's actually less predatory fish. They grow at a slower rate, and more of the biomass is in gizzard shad. It gets extreme whenever you start talking about systems that are really far outside of the native range of gizzard shad. I'm thinking like, well, we had Amber Leon from Arizona. When gizzard shad are introduced in Arizona, that's a big deal. And they will often start to do some sort of control methods and try to remove those gizzard shad. So it's, if gizzard shad are introduced in a fishery in Texas, we go, yeah, well, that was going to happen because there's gizzard shad everywhere. OHIV is full of gizzard shad. It's just part of what is native to that environment. So in that system, he's going to see, he's going to catch some good fish the next couple of years, but long term, they're going to have to do something with the big adult gizzard shad.
There you go. Hopefully that answers your question, Owen. I appreciate you submitting that. Yeah, awesome stuff, Steve. Another great lake hotline, great episode. And man, obviously we're recording this here late November, but this comes out December 1st. I don't know when exactly you're leaving, but good luck on your adventure.
Oh no, we've got more time. We got more time. I'm not going to tell everybody when I'm leaving. That sounds crazy, but great episode, and we got it in under 2 hours. Can't even believe it.
Yeah, it's shocking. But appreciate you, sir. Appreciate the folks listening, and another great episode of The Real Biology, man.
Thanks, Bailey. See you soon, brother.
All right, folks. Appreciate y'all. We'll see you on the next one.